My name is Karen. I am 30 years old. I never thought a simple hiking trip could change everything. It started like any other weekend. My boyfriend Sam and I decided to go hiking in the mountains. We had planned it for weeks. It was supposed to be a peaceful escape from the city. Just us, nature, and the open trail. But things don't always go as planned, do they? I remember the morning we left. The sun was shining brightly. The air felt fresh. I packed our bags while Sam checked the map. "We'll have a great time," Sam said with a smile. He was always positive, always making me feel safe. We drove for hours, listening to music and laughing. I was excited. We arrived at the trailhead around noon. The mountains were beautiful, towering above us like giants. I felt a sense of adventure. I was ready to leave behind the noise of the city. Sam, of course, was leading the way. He had done this many times before. I trusted him completely. The first few hours were easy. The trail was smooth, the trees thick and green. We took pictures, stopped for small breaks, and enjoyed the view. But then, as the day wore on, the trail began to get steeper. It was harder to climb, the rocks were loose, the forest seemed denser. I noticed how quiet it was. Not a single bird chirping. Just the sound of our footsteps and the occasional rustling of leaves. That's when I started to feel uneasy. "Sam, do you think we're going the right way?" I asked. He turned around and smiled. "Of course. I've been here before. Trust me." But something in his voice didn't feel right. It was too calm, too reassuring. We kept going, but the path kept getting harder. My legs were starting to ache. The sun was setting, and I began to feel the weight of the journey. "Maybe we should turn back," I suggested. But Sam shook his head. "We're almost there, just a little longer." I tried to ignore the growing fear inside me. After all, it was just a hike. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The air grew colder as we climbed higher. The trees around us seemed to close in. I looked behind me, but the trail was now just a narrow path between thick bushes. It felt as though the forest was swallowing us whole. My heart began to race. We were alone. No one else was in sight. I tried to push my fear away. "I'm just tired," I told myself. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Sam was still ahead of me, his steps steady and confident. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. His silence only made my fear grow. Then I heard something. A snap of a twig, soft but sharp. I stopped in my tracks. My eyes darted around the trees, but nothing. Maybe it was just an animal. But why did I feel so exposed? I took a deep breath and tried to catch up to Sam. When I reached him, he turned and gave me a reassuring smile. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, though my heart wasn't in it. "Let's keep moving," Sam said, his voice carrying a sense of urgency. And so we did. But as we moved further up the mountain, I started to notice something strange. The sky, which had been clear when we started, was now darkening. The clouds were rolling in fast. We had to reach the top before the storm hit. Sam was moving faster now, almost like he was in a hurry. I struggled to keep up, my legs aching from the climb. I thought about asking him again if we should turn back, but something stopped me. There was something in the way he was acting that made me hesitate. His pace had quickened, and he wasn't looking back at me anymore. It was as though he was deliberately leaving me behind. I felt my chest tighten. "Sam!" I called out, but again no response. At this point, I was scared. I could feel it in my bones. I was alone, even though he was right there in front of me. The mountain was too quiet. The storm was too close. I quickened my steps, trying to catch up. And that's when I saw it. A shadow. It moved quickly between the trees, just out of my sight. I froze. Who else was up here? There was no one else, but that shadow, it had to be someone. A person? My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to calm myself. Maybe it was just an animal, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that someone or something was watching us. I hurried to catch up with Sam, but when I reached the spot where I had last seen him, he was gone. I looked around, panic starting to set in. "Huh? Sam?" I yelled. No answer. I was alone on the mountain. And that was when I heard the rustling of leaves behind me. I turned around slowly, my breath catching in my throat. There was someone or something there. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. The rustling sound grew louder, closer. I could feel my breath catching in my throat, my hands trembling at my sides. Was it Sam? I called out again, "Sam!" But there was no answer. Just the wind and the rustling coming from the trees behind me. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the thick shadows between the trails. Nothing. I felt like I was being watched. I could hear my own breath, loud in my ears. My feet felt like lead as I took a step backward, moving closer to the trail. But then, something made a loud noise, a branch snapping underfoot. I whipped around, my heart racing. Nothing. The mountain was silent again. It was like the world itself had held its breath. I knew then I was alone, completely, utterly alone. Where was Sam? Why hadn't he come back for me? I started to walk quickly, my legs shaking with every step. The sky was darker now, the clouds hanging low and threatening. I had to find Sam. I had to get out of here. But with every step, the fear grew. I called his name again, my voice shaking. "Sam?" Nothing. I kept walking, but the path seemed endless. The trees around me began to look more like walls than a forest. Everything felt wrong. I turned a corner in the trail, and that's when I saw it. A flash of movement ahead. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding louder than before. Was it Sam? I moved forward cautiously, my feet barely making a sound. The shape ahead was small, crouching between the trees. I got closer, and then I froze. It wasn't Sam. It was a man, a stranger. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, everything stopped. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. He didn't speak, didn't make a sound. He just watched me, his face hidden by shadows. But I saw enough. The terror in his eyes made my stomach twist. Something was wrong, very wrong. I took a step back, my body moving on its own. I needed to get away from him. I turned and ran. But the path was different now, twisting in ways I didn't recognize. I heard footsteps behind me, fast, chasing. I dared not look back. I pushed myself harder, stumbling over rocks and roots, trying to stay ahead. Then I heard it, a scream. It was faint, distant, but it made my blood run cold. Sam. I didn't stop running. I couldn't stop. But every step I took felt like it was leading me further into the heart of the mountain. I turned another corner, and that's when I saw him. Sam. He was lying on the ground, blood trickling from a wound on his head. I ran to him, my heart in my throat. Sam! I cried. I knelt beside him, shaking his shoulder. His eyes were open, but he didn't respond. I could see the fear in his eyes, his breath coming in shallow gasps. What happened? I whispered, but there was no answer. I looked around, panicked, flooding my chest. The man from before. He was gone. I didn't know if he was still near, but I could feel his presence. I had to get Sam to safety. But how? I looked around frantically, trying to think of a way out. Then I heard it again, the rustling. But this time it was closer. I stood quickly, my heart racing. We weren't alone. I had to move. I grabbed Sam's arm, trying to pull him up, but he was too heavy. I couldn't do it alone. My hands shook with fear, and I almost stumbled as I tried to drag him to safety. The rustling came again. I turned, just as a figure emerged from the trees. It wasn't the man from before. This one was different, taller, more imposing. He moved toward us slowly, almost casually. I could feel my breath catch in my throat as I backed away, my legs shaking beneath me. What did he want? What was happening? I had no time to think. I had to act. Sam, wake up, I screamed. But Sam didn't respond. The figure was closer now, just a few feet away. I couldn't run. I couldn't fight. I was trapped. But then, a sound from behind. I shout. Someone was coming. I turned around and saw a group of people running toward us. I didn't recognize them, but they were coming fast. The figure in front of us stopped. He turned, as if considering whether to fight or flee. Then, without a word, he turned and disappeared back into the forest. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what had just happened. The people who had arrived helped Sam to his feet. They didn't ask questions, they just moved. We were no longer alone. But as we hurried down the mountain, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, something dangerous, and it was still watching us. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share. See you in the next video.